The rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the cracked pavement of Elm Street like 1,000 tiny fists. It was late afternoon, the kind of gray, dreary day that made the world feel smaller, colder, and lonelier than it ought to be. 9-year-old Tommy Grayson stood at the bus stop, his sneakers soaked through, the laces trailing in a puddle. His backpack hung heavy on his shoulders, stuffed with library books and a crumpled spelling test he'd gotten an A on earlier that week. He clutched a single dollar bill and 3/4 in his fist, the exact fare for the number 12 bus that would take him home to his mom and little sister. It wasn't much, but it was all he had, scraped together from coins he'd found under the couch, and a quarter his mom had slipped him that morning with a tired smile. The bus stop was a rusted metal bench beneath a sagging shelter, the plastic roof leaking in steady drips that plinked against Tommy's hood. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman, her thin frame hunched against the wind, her coat threadbare and patched at the elbows. She carried a plastic grocery bag, the handles stretched taut around a loaf of bread and a can of soup. Her hands trembled as she fumbled in her pockets, pulling out a handful of damp nickels and pennies that clinked together like a broken song. Tommy watched her silently, his brown eyes wide and curious beneath the fringe of his soggy bangs. The woman muttered to herself, counting the coins again and again, her lips moving in a frantic rhythm. 45? 50? Oh no, no, no! Her voice cracked, and Tommy saw the way her shoulders slumped, the way her eyes glistened with something more than just rain. She was old, not ancient, but old enough that her hair was streaked with gray, her face lined with years of worry. She looked like someone who'd been fighting a battle she couldn't win for a long, long time. The distant rumble of the number 12 bus broke the silence, its headlights cutting through the mist like a promise. Tommy straightened, clutching his money tighter, but the woman's muttering grew louder, more desperate. I need $1 more. Just $1. Please. She turned to the empty street, as if someone might appear out of the rain to save her. No one did. The bus squealed to a stop, its doors hissing open. The driver, a burly man with a gray beard and a permanent scowl, leaned out. Let's go, folks. I ain't got all day. His voice was gruff, impatient, the kind that didn't leave room for excuses. Tommy stepped forward, dropping his dollar and quarters into the fare box with a satisfying clink. He glanced back at the woman, who was still counting her coins, her hands shaking so badly now that a penny slipped and rolled into a puddle. She bent to pick it up, her knees creaking, and Tommy saw the tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Ma'am, the driver barked, you got the fare or not? I gotta keep moving. I'm trying, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, just one more minute. Rules are rules, the driver snapped, already reaching for the lever to close the door. No fare, no ride. Tommy froze halfway to his usual seat at the back. He looked at the woman, then at the driver, then down at his empty hands. His mom's voice echoed in his head. We don't got much, Tommy, but we always share what we can. It was something she said every Thanksgiving when they took a plate of mashed potatoes to old Mr. Jenkins next door, even though they barely had enough for themselves. Tommy didn't have another dollar. He'd spent everything he had, but he did have something else. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, battered tin box. It was his treasure chest, where he kept the things that mattered most. A shiny marble, a feather from a hawk he'd seen in the park, and a single crumpled $5 bill. It was his emergency money, saved up over months from birthday cards and odd jobs like raking leaves for Mrs. Carter down the street. He'd been dreaming of buying a new comic book, Captain Thunder number 47, the one where the hero saves the city from a giant robot. But as he looked at the woman, her head bowed in defeat, he knew what he had to do. Wait, Tommy called, darting back to the front of the bus. He thrust the $5 bill into the driver's hand. This is for her. Let her on, please. The driver raised an eyebrow, but he took the money and punched a ticket. All right, kid. You're a regular hero, huh? There was a flicker of something, maybe respect in his gruff tone, but Tommy didn't notice. He was too busy watching the woman's face. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. "Oh, oh, honey, you didn't have to." Her voice broke, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Tommy shrugged, his cheeks flushing red. "It's okay. You looked like you needed it more." He scurried back to his seat, sinking low as the bus lurched forward, suddenly aware of the other passengers staring at him, some with soft smiles, others with curious glances. The woman sat a few rows ahead, clutching her grocery bag like it was a lifeline, and every now and then she turned to look at him, her eyes shining with something Tommy couldn't quite name. The ride home was quiet, the rain tapping a steady rhythm against the windows. Tommy didn't mind that his comic book dream was gone. He felt warm inside, like he'd swallowed a little piece of sunlight. When he got off at his stop, the woman waved at him through the glass, her smile small but real. He waved back, then trudged through the puddles to the tiny apartment he shared with his mom and sister, the tin box a little lighter in his backpack. That night, Tommy didn't tell his mom what he'd done. She was too tired anyway, her hands cracked and red from washing dishes at the diner all day. His little sister, Ellie, chattered about a frog she'd seen at school, and Tommy just listened, nodding along as he ate his bowl of watery soup. He went to bed with the rain still falling outside, the sound lulling him into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning was different. The rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and glistening, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass. Tommy woke to the sound of Ellie banging on his door, her voice high and excited. "Tommy, Tommy, come quick! There's a car outside, a fancy one." He stumbled out of bed, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and followed her to the window. Sure enough, parked in front of their peeling, two-story building, was a car unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was long and sleek, black as midnight, with chrome trim that gleamed in the morning sun. The windows were tinted dark, hiding whoever or whatever was inside. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors in bathrobes and slippers whispering to each other, pointing at the car like it was a spaceship that had landed in their run-down corner of town. "What's it doing here?" Ellie asked, pressing her nose to the glass. She was 6, all freckles and wild curls, and she looked at Tommy like he had all the answers. "I don't know," he mumbled, his heart thumping in his chest. He pulled on his jeans and a faded hoodie, then grabbed his sneakers, still damp from the day before, and headed downstairs. Ellie trailed after him, tugging at his sleeve, but their mom called her back. "Stay inside, Ellie. Tommy, be careful." The street was buzzing with curiosity as Tommy stepped outside. The car's engine purred softly, a low hum that vibrated through the soles of his feet. He stood there, hands stuffed in his pockets, unsure what to do, when the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp black suit that looked like it cost more than Tommy's mom made in a year. He wore sunglasses, even though the sun was barely up, and his face was all sharp angles and quiet confidence. "Are you Thomas Grayson?" the man asked, his voice smooth and deep. Tommy blinked, startled. Yeah, that's me. But everybody calls me Tommy." The man nodded, then walked around to the back of the car and opened the passenger door. "Someone wants to meet you, Tommy. Please come with me." The neighbors' whispers grew louder, and Tommy felt their eyes boring into him. He hesitated, glancing back at the apartment window where Ellie's face was pressed against the glass, her mouth an excited little O. His mom stood behind her, arms crossed, worry etched into her tired features. Tommy gave her a small wave, then took a deep breath and walked toward the car. Inside, the seats were leather, soft and cool against his skin. The air smelled faintly of peppermint and something expensive, like cologne or polished wood. Tommy slid in, his sneakers squeaking against the pristine floor, and the door closed behind him with a soft thud. Across from him sat a woman, not the woman from the bus, but someone else entirely. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair swept into an elegant bun and a face that was both stern and kind. She wore a navy dress with a string of pearls around her neck, and her hands rested calmly in her lap, a gold ring glinting on her finger. "Hello, Tommy," she said, her voice warm but steady. "My name is Evelyn Hartwell. I've heard a lot about you." Tommy swallowed hard, his hands fidgeting in his lap. Um, Hi. How do you know me?" Evelyn smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "Yesterday you did something extraordinary. You helped a woman on the bus, a woman named Margaret. Do you remember her?" Tommy nodded slowly, his mind racing back to the rain, the coins, the $5 bill. "Yeah, she didn't have enough money, so I gave her mine. It wasn't a big deal." "Oh, but it was," Evelyn said, leaning forward slightly. "It was a very big deal to her, and to me." Tommy frowned, confused. "Why? Who are you? And why is there a fancy car outside my house?" Evelyn chuckled softly, a sound like wind chimes on a quiet day. "Fair questions, all of them. Let me start from the beginning. Margaret is my sister. She's been struggling for a long time. Life hasn't been kind to her, and I've spent years trying to find her, to help her. She's too proud to take anything from me directly, but yesterday she called me. She told me about a boy, a kind, brave boy, who gave up his own money to make sure she could get home. She was crying when she told me, Tommy. She said it was the first time in years she felt like someone saw her, really saw her, as a person." Tommy's throat tightened, and he looked down at his hands, unsure what to say. I didn't want her to be stuck in the rain." "I know," Evelyn said gently, "and that's why I'm here. I wanted to meet the boy who reminded my sister that there's still goodness in the world. I wanted to thank you." Tommy glanced up, his eyes wide. "You drove all the way here just to say thanks?" "Not just that," Evelyn said, reaching into a small bag beside her. She pulled out an envelope, thick and cream-colored, and handed it to him. "Open it." Tommy's fingers trembled as he tore the flap open. Inside was a stack of crisp bills, hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars, and a note written in neat looping handwriting. "For the boy who gave more than he had. Use this to chase your dreams." "All right." He stared at it, his breath catching in his chest. I can't take this. It's too much." "You can, and you will," Evelyn said firmly, though her eyes were soft. "You gave Margaret something priceless yesterday. Hope. This is my way of giving a little back to you. I've also spoken to your mother. She's waiting inside, and she knows everything. She's proud of you, Tommy. So am I." Tommy's vision blurred, and he wiped at his eyes with his sleeve. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Evelyn replied. "Just keep being you. That's more than enough." The ride back to the curb was short, but it felt like forever. When Tommy stepped out, the neighbors erupted into murmurs, and Ellie came barreling out of the apartment, throwing her arms around him. "What happened? Who was that lady? Is she a queen or something?" Tommy laughed, clutching the envelope tight. "No, she's just nice, really nice." Their mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes red but shining with a rare, fierce pride. She pulled Tommy into a hug, whispering, "You're my good boy, you know that?" That night, the Grayson apartment was filled with a warmth it hadn't known in years. Tommy's mom used some of the money to order pizza, real pizza, not the frozen kind, and they sat on the couch, laughing and talking about what they'd do with the rest. Ellie wanted a bike. Tommy wanted that comic book, but he also wanted to save some for his mom so she wouldn't have to work so hard. And maybe, just maybe, he'd buy something for Margaret if he ever saw her again, a warm coat or a hot meal. Outside, the luxury car was long gone, but its memory lingered, a quiet reminder that kindness could ripple further than anyone ever imagined. Tommy fell asleep with the envelope under his pillow, dreaming of heroes, not just the ones in comic books, but the ones who lived in the real world, hiding in plain sight. And somewhere across town, Margaret sat by her window, the rain long gone, a small smile on her face as she thought of the boy who changed her day, and maybe her life, with a single act of grace. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with your friends. Hit that subscribe button to catch the latest videos and stories that remind us of the power of kindness. What would you do with a gift like Tommy's? Let me know in the comments below. See you in the next one.